Alright, so welcome back everybody. So for this video, I'm going to show you guys how to play Earth. So let me get started showing you guys how to play this game. So in this game, the first thing I wanted to mention is the way you're going to trigger the end of this game, okay? The way you're going to trigger the end of this game is, the point of the game is to build a tableau of 16 cards on your island. We each get a starting island, okay? And so this is one of the islands you could potentially start with, okay? So it's the one I chose for this video. And so in our island, we're trying to basically build a lot of different plant cards and terrain cards and stuff like that into our island. And so the way to trigger the game will trigger at the end of the game is by simply building, you know, a row of 4. So 4 rows of 4 and 4 columns of 4, okay? It's basically how you're going to do it. That's how you're going to end a game. And when the first time a player does that, completes their 4x4 grid, then if there are still some other players who haven't had an equal amount of turns, then they will continue, so that way everyone gets an equal amount of turns, and then the game will be over. So how do you score points in this game? Well, we do have a nice handy little thing on our player board here that kind of shows us how we're going to score victory points. And here we are. So first of all, we have this one here, the base victory point on cards. So you're going to get victory points for your island, potentially could get you victory points. Your climate card could potentially give you victory points. And the cards that you're playing into your tableau could potentially give you victory points as well. So that's one of the ways you're going to score victory points, with just simply playing, or should I say planting, cards into your tableau. You could potentially get victory points. And these leaves on the card indicate how many victory points they're worth at the end of the game. So this one here, the red cage fungus, is worth 3 victory points at the end of game. But there are lots of other ways you can score victory points. You can also score victory points per composted card. A lot of the cards in this game are going to force you to compost cards or mulch cards into this location here. But the cool thing is, even though you no longer have access to them to play with, they count as 1 victory point each that you compost. So there are lots of benefits to composting cards, and you could even potentially view it as a benefit that you're going to compost cards you don't need for victory points. So instead of simply just discarding cards and not getting victory points or discarding them, you're composting them for victory points. Now, there are still ways of discarding cards that won't go onto your player board, that won't be composted, but the point is there are lots of ways to compost cards for victory points. There are even benefits that allow you to just simply compost a card from the deck into your compost without looking at it, of course. So that's another main way you're going to score victory points. Another main way is you'll get 1 victory point per sprout. So some cards have these sprout, basically these buds or sprout locations on cards, and this one has 5 on it. So whenever you sprout a card or put a bud on a card, you're just going to put this little green cube on it, and it tells you how many you can put onto this particular card. This one here can have 5 of them. Some can only have 1, some can only have 2, but the max that one will ever have is 6. And then for each one of these green cubes on all of your cards, per green cube, you're going to get victory points. 1 victory point for each one. So that's another way you'll score victory points, is with that. Now there's another way you can score victory points. Each plant, not all of them, but each plant can have a growth on it. Some can grow really tall. And so for each segment you grow, it's considered a trunk. So if you're growing a tree, then you're just going to keep building up on your tree, on your card, depending on what level it is, and eventually you'll reach its canopy. If you get a canopy, which are these, which are still just like any other growth, so if you get a card that says +1 growth, and the last part of the trunk is the canopy, because it can only have 4 layers on it, or a height of 4, then you would top it off with a canopy, because that would be number 4, because this is 3 here. And then each card will actually give you a set amount of victory points based on the card, and if you were able to get the canopy onto that card or not. Now, if you don't get a canopy onto a card, then you just get 1 victory point for each trunk piece that makes up that card. So you're still going to get victory points as long as you have, of course, the trunks. However, some trunks are just simply a canopy. The trunks that have a growth of just 1 will just get a canopy, and you'll use the blue one to indicate, you can use the blue one to indicate that it's just 1. So that's how that works. If it's just a 2 trunk, then it would be 1 segment of a trunk, and then how about a red canopy? There you go. So, and so on and so on. So that's basically how you're going to get victory points. Another way you'll get victory points is from the growth. There's also several other ways you'll get victory points. You'll also get victory points for certain terrain cards. Let's see if I have a terrain card here. Let's see here. So this one is the Mixed Forest. It will tell me that I can get 3 victory points per basically mushroom icon that I have in the column that is in with this Mixed Forest. So at most, I could only have 3 of that icon, because you can only have, 4 in a column. So that would get me 3, 6, 9 victory points at most from this card, and that's assuming all of the other cards in the column had this icon on it. Okay? What has that icon? Well, you'll notice it has this icon right here. It's the same icon. So you'll know for sure or not if the particular card you played has this icon or not, for instance, because they have them to the left of the name of the card. And there are 4 different kinds of icons for a flora. But there are also these icons that indicate that this is a terrain card. And obviously you'll get victory points for various ways from various terrain cards based on your tableau, on your island. Another way you'll score victory points in this game is from ecosystems. Now, if it's your first time playing, you don't need to play with ecosystems, but assuming you are playing with the ecosystems cards, you could potentially have access to 3 ecosystems cards. One ecosystem, this one in particular, is sitting on my player board, so that means I'm the only one that can earn 10 victory points if I have 2 green abilities. So green abilities are on cards, and there's not very many cards that have green abilities. But yes, that's a potential way I can score victory points. Then there are 2 more ecosystems that other players have access to, and if they manage to, do well, they can score a lot of victory points with these. Of course, everyone has access to the 2 that are on the board with all the animals. So, for instance, we have a Nile Delta for every player who has this icon here that's got basically 2 little water drops. For every icon you have of that, for every 2 of them, you get 3 victory points that is in your tableau. And it also includes your island and climate card. If they have that same icon, you get 3 points if you have 2 of those from that as well. Or all together, obviously. And then the canopy over here is another potential ecosystem you could have. For every canopy you have, which are those colorful trunk pieces, you get 2 points. So, that's just something you can work towards, that everyone can work towards, because those are just some of the potential ecosystems that you could play with. Now, there's also another way to score points in this game, and that is with the animals. So let's bring up the animal cards and show you them. Now, there is a less competitive side. So for your first game, they don't have you access this side of the board. And on the other side of the board, there isn't a place for these 2 ecosystem cards, because if you're playing the beginner version, you're not playing with ecosystems. Another thing, if you're playing with the ecosystem, you're only playing with 10 points for each leaf you put down here. So instead of here, where it's like if you're the first person to complete this red-eyed tree frog, then you get 15 points. The second player would get 11 points if they completed this red-eyed tree frog, and so on and so on and so on. But if you're playing with a beginner, these numbers here are just 10 each. So everyone gets the same amount of points. So there's no, you know, super race to getting these completed because you're getting all the same amount of victory points. So how do you like get victory points from these animals though? Remember, now there's tons of animals in this game, tons. There's different ways to obviously score with animals in this game, but I'm going with the animals that I played randomly from my first game. So if you're the first person, for instance, if you're playing the standard version, if you're the first person to fill 2+ columns, meaning you have 2 columns of 4 cards completed, and you are the first person to do that in your island, you get 15 victory points. And you'd have a leaf, and we each have 4 leaves, so we can only put one of our leaves down for each animal. But we can put our leaf down here to indicate that we scored that 15 points. So at the end of the game, we're going to get that 15 victory points for completing that if we were the first one to do it. And then there's, for instance, this red-eyed tree frog. If you're the first person to get 3 or more green ability cards, that includes islands, and obviously all the cards you could potentially get in your tableau. If you're the first person to get 3 or more, you get to be the person to put your leaf here for 15 victory points. So that's how that's going to work for the red-eyed tree frog. The American bison here, it's going to require you to have 4 flora cards that have 6 of these leaves symbols on them. Hence, you know, one of these, this one, for instance, is one of the 4 that you could potentially get. And you're going to need 3 more of these kinds of cards that have 6 of these basically squares with the leaves on them where you put down the little sprouts, okay? So you basically need 4 flora cards that have 6 sprouts, that have 6 sprouts on the cards, okay? So that's basically what you're going to need. So you need to have 4 of these, but basically 4 of this. So that's another potential scoring card for animals that you could score with. And then another potential one is this grasshopper here. And if you're the first player to get 4 or more of this particular type of icon, which is kind of like a lotus icon, then you'll obviously get a lot of victory points that way. What is a card that might have that icon? Well, here's one of them. The Sacred Lotus is one of those cards that you might need that you could potentially get that would work in helping you score the most points with that particular grasshopper, okay? This one here, this lichen has the same icon. So this dragon sprout. So there's a lot, and then this is like a bush icon, and then there's obviously tree icons as well. So those are the 4 icons: the mushroom icon or fungus icon, this type of icon, obviously the bush icon, and the tree icon are the 4 icons for plants, and you could potentially score victory points based on what you have of those. So that's how all the animals work that you could potentially play with. Of course, there's a lot of animals in this game, but that's the 4 that I played with. So at least you understand those 4. Okay? And these animals are double-sided, so you're not always going to play with the giraffe. But you're never going to play with this animal and this animal at the same time because they're double-sided. Okay? And this one's almost exactly identical, except it's you have to fill 2 rows in your island, or 2 columns in your island. Okay? So that's how you'll score victory points. That's all of the different potential ways you can score victory points in this game. Now, how do you start this game off? What's the setup of this game like? Well, first of all, everyone's going to get a climate card, and everyone is going to get a island card. And because they are double-sided, you are still technically choosing which side you're going to play with. For instance, I chose this side, the tropical monsoon climate, and I get 4 victory points at the end of the game for it. And it gives me this cool ability that says if I choose the blue action, I get to do this icon here, which is 2 growth. We'll explain how actions work momentarily. But I could have also chosen this side instead for only one victory point, but then I get to do a different ability. I can mulch a card from, I basically can discard a card from my compost for 3 sprouts, or 3 buds, basically. So that's two of the potential climates you could start with. And then this is our island. This is how our setup starts in the game. Now, I chose this side, but there's also this side on the other side that does different stuff. And you'll notice everyone's going to have a different setup. So you'll see that this has a 6, this has a 3, and this has a 6. But this side has a 12, a 5, and a 6. So everyone's going to have a different setup. What do these icons mean, though? Well, the 12 next to this icon here means that you get to draw cards. So I get to draw 12 cards. What do you know? I drew 12 cards already. This icon here next to it means that I have to now basically compost 5 cards from my hand. Hence the hand with the little arrows around it plus the 5. So now I'd have to mulch or compost 5 cards from my hand. So what would I compost from my hand? That's the good question. Well, and you'll put them face down, which you decide to mulch or compost. So, like, for instance, I'll compost this one, and this one, and this one. And I'm going to keep these, I think. And I think I'll compost this one and this one. That makes 5 cards that I've composted. So these are worth 5 victory points at the end of the game. That's nice. So I'm making victory points just by simply putting cards here that I'm not going to utilize anyway, or can't utilize because I can only have a certain amount of cards to start with. Then there's another icon on this card. This one here means you get 6 soil. Soil tokens are basically our money in this game. So I get 6 of those. So let me get a 5 and a 1. Okay. And put them on my player board. So this indicates 5 basically soil or money. Okay? 5 soil or money. Okay? And this is 1 soil or money. Now, in order to plant cards in our game, and we'll explain how we do that in a moment, but in order to plant cards, you'll notice this has a cost of soil on it. This means I have to pay 8 soil to basically play this card in my tableau. I only have 6 money, though. So obviously I wouldn't be able to play that yet. But yes, that's what this is for. It's for planting cards, and it's basically money. Soil is basically our currency in the game. Okay? So now that I've explained the starting setup of the game, let's go ahead and I'll show you guys the actions and what they do next. So let's zoom in on the actions. Okay? So we can see them better. Okay, so our first one here is a green action. Then we've got the red action, blue action, and yellow action. Green action refers to planting, so the planting action. This one refers to the composting action. This one refers to the watering action. And this one refers to the growing action. So 4 different actions that you can take in the game. The cool thing is you can choose whatever one you want to do. So even if player 2 chose the green action or the planting action, when it was my turn and I was next, I could still choose to do the planting action right after him. That's allowed, okay? So let me explain how the actions work now. So you'll use this leaf to indicate you're using the action, just to remind yourself that this was the action you used, or you're using currently. So we have a bunch of different icons here. You'll notice we have this +2, and basically this icon here with the arrow on it, but it looks like a card. This particular icon means you get to plant 2 cards, okay? So basically, that's what the action was saying anyways. It's a planting action. So you get to plant 2 cards that you can afford to plant from your obviously from your hand. So let's go to the playing area next. Okay, let me zoom out a little bit. Okay. Okay, so when you place down a card, you can place it wherever you want. But at some point, you're going to be limited to 4x4 grid, okay? But you can decide how that 4x4 grid's gonna continue. You might put a card down in here in the middle, and it could potentially be at the very end of your grid, or the very bottom of your grid, or the very top of your grid. But the point is, at some point, you're gonna be limited to where you can put cards down. Now, when you place down a card, after you place down one card, the next card does not have to go basically like this, like up or down or right or left. The card can also be played diagonally. Now, not very many games allow you to play a card diagonally, but this game does mean you can. Obviously, you're still limited to a 4x4 grid, but yes, you can play a card diagonally, so that is a legal move, okay? So, let's say I'm going to plant 2 cards. Well, I want to do something I can afford, obviously, so maybe I would plant this terrain card. Okay, so this terrain card is the Mixed Forest, and it would cost me 4 money to basically plant it. Okay, so let's say I'll plant it. So I can plant it, let's just say I'm going to plant it here so you can see it better, okay? And then if I put mushroom icons into this column with it, I get 3 extra victory points. So that's going to cost me 4. So right now I would only have 2 money left. So I could, if I could afford to, I could play another card. Something that I could obviously afford. Maybe perhaps this one here. This one, this red cage fungus, only costs 1. So I could afford to play it on the same turn as well. So let's do that. Let's place it into the same columns so I get the victory points for it at the end of the game. Okay? Cool. So I've got my 2 cards planted, and I spent a total of 5 soil or 5 money on those 2 cards. So I pay that back to the bank, so to speak. And now, or I guess back to the farm. And then that's not all, because that's just part of the turn. So let's go back to the green action and zoom back in on the action location. Okay, so it has something else on here. So now that I've planted my 2 cards, I get to do something else. I get to draw 4 cards. What's what that icon means there. Plus, I get 4. I get to draw 4 of them. So that means I get to draw 4 cards from the deck. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And then out of these 4, I get to only keep 1 card, discarding the rest. Meaning, these cards here that I'm discarding do not go into my compost. They actually get discarded. So I'm only going to get to keep 1 of these cards that I potentially could want, you know? Maybe this one. Or maybe this one. Okay, maybe I decide to keep that one. Okay, and then the rest of them get discarded. That's what that's going to do. But that doesn't complete everything that I do with the green action. So let's zoom back out. Another thing that's going to happen after you've performed the action, if you have any green abilities on cards, you can activate them if you want. What cards do I have that have a green ability? Well, my island has one, for one thing. It says, if I planted a terrain card this turn, I get to draw a card. Well, I did plant a terrain card this turn. I planted a Mixed Forest this turn. So that means I would get to draw a free card from the deck. Cool, cool. But I have another green power here as well. This green ability here that I planted earlier, this Mixed Forest, allows me to mulch 2 cards from my hand if I want to. So I could, for instance, mulch 2 of these cards for victory points later down the road, if I wanted to. It's optional. I don't have to. But maybe I don't want to right now because I think I'm going to use everything here, or want to use. So then that wouldn't complete the action phase. Then you'll notice on the action, there's a bunch of other icons below this spot here. So let's, like I said, bring it up closer so you guys can see it better. So then this actually affects all players, okay? So this will affect all players here. So you see this icon here? It means this, all of this bottom row affects all the other players. So that means the other players are going to be doing something at the same time as me. I might be taking my action, but they're going to get to do beneficial things for them as well. And what they get to do is indicated here. They get to plant a card if they want to. It's not a have to, but if they can afford to and they want to, they can plant one card on your turn into their tableau, into their island. And then they can also draw one card from the deck. So you get to look at 4 and get to keep one, but they just get to draw one. So that's what they get to do. They get to do both of those if they want to. Those are optional things. And they also get to activate green abilities. So if they have a green ability that they want to activate and can activate, because some are still contingent on certain things, then they can activate green abilities even though it's your turn. Pretty cool, right? Pretty cool. Okay, so then we have 3 other actions remaining. Next we have the compost action, which is this here. This icon means you get 5 soil. So you get to have, so basically you're getting 5 money. Then this icon here is you get to compost 2 cards from the deck. So let's zoom in a little more. So that icon there, okay? That icon there means you get to compost two cards from the deck. So you're not losing anything, but you're gaining victory points. So you're gaining money and victory points when you take the compost action. You get money and victory points. Your opponent, and then of course you get to still activate the ability with the red ability. So if you have any red abilities or multicolored abilities, you can activate them if you want to. What are some red abilities that you could potentially activate? Let's zoom back out. Okay, so let's see here. Here's one. If I had this card in my tableau, I'd get 3 money for just simply getting to activate a red ability. I could get 3 money every time somebody composts or I compost. Pretty cool. This dragon sprout here allows me to copy 1 red ability from my island, and then I can change the use of it. So like, for instance, I could choose different red abilities per time I compost or per my opponent compost and yada yada. So for instance, I could copy this lichen ability, the gray reindeer lichen ability, and get 3 more money, 3 more soil. So that's just some of the potential abilities you could get with red. Here's another one. I can compost 1 card from my hand, and if I do that, I get 1 sprout that I can put onto a card. So that's another thing. I'm losing a victory point, basically. When I'm gaining a victory point because I'm mulching a card from my hand, but I'm also going to get a victory point for sprouting as well. So I'm getting victory points for that. So those are just some of the red abilities you could potentially activate when red abilities activate. But then there are also multicolored abilities as well. You'll notice this one has both the blue, the yellow, and the red on it. That means whenever these 3 actions are initiated, if you have one of these cards, you can activate it even though it's not exactly that color, because these are basically multicolored abilities, so they activate when this action, and this action is activated. That means you'll never activate this ability when green action is initiated, okay? And so, like for instance, this one, I can basically pay 1 soil to mulch 3 cards from my hand, getting some extra victory points that way. If I have 3 cards I don't want, I can basically compost them, mulch them to my compost pile, okay? So that's how the composting action is going to work. Okay, so then what else is there? Well, we still have the watering action, and we still have the growing action as well. So, for instance, let's go to the watering action. So the watering action allows me to basically sprout 6 buds onto any flora that I have. So I get to do 6. Luckily, I have this fungus here that has 6 on it. So I could literally just fill it up in one fell swoop on one turn, putting them all on here, which are giving me extra victory points at the end of game. Now, obviously, I can't put any more down on here, but during the course of the game, there might be some actions that say you lose a sprout or lose a bud. But then if you do lose it, you get something else even better, potentially. So you might have it on here full, but that doesn't mean it will be full for the whole game. Then you'll also get 2 soil. So not only are you watering and getting victory points for watering your plants, your flora, you're also getting 2 money as well, 2 soil. Then your opponents, they get to choose the blue ability. Oh yeah, I forgot, I didn't mention the red ability. So the red ability, the blue ability, and the yellow ability are different from the green ability, because you can only choose one of the 2 options for each thing. So if you are not the player who chose the composting action and you're the other player that chose it, then one of the other players that are playing, then you can either choose to get 2 soil or 2 money, or you can choose to compost 2 cards from the deck. You're not allowed to do both. You can only do one or the other. So the same thing would happen with watering the plants as well. You can either choose, as the other player, you can either choose to sprout 2 buds onto your flora, or, and it can be any flora, it can be multiple flora, but only 2 max, 2 sprouts max, or you can choose to get 2 money or 2 soil. Okay, those are your options. Okay, so I explained everything except for growing, the growing action. So, what does the growing action do? Well, first of all, I get to draw 4 cards. If I'm the player that chose to grow, I get to draw 4 cards. So this is the main way you're going to get lots of extra cards from the deck, is by growing, because you're going to get to keep all 4 cards that you draw there. So that's the main way you're going to get extra cards from the deck. Then, if you're the person that chose growing, you also get this icon here, which means you get to grow 2 of your plants, 2 of your flora. Well, I only have that 1 fungus right now, and it's got a trunk value of just 1. So literally, if I chose the growing action, I'd be almost wasting it, because I'd only be able to grow like 1, because that's the highest it can go, is just 1. And then it would be worth 1 victory point at the end of the game, because it's already at its canopy level. But if I had other cards, I could potentially grow a whole bunch, obviously, of plants. And, so this is growing is definitely an action you're going to do after you have some flora for sure. More than 1, and obviously a flora that has, room to grow. That can be grown high, like a tree or something like that. But the fungus, it's not going to grow very high at all, is it? So that's what growing does. That's how that growing action works. Then we also have what the opponents can do. Your opponents, the other players, they can choose either to draw 2 cards, or they can choose to grow 2 cards. They can grow 2 of their plants. So they can either choose to grow 2 plants or draw 2 cards. Those are their options. And of course, they can activate all of their yellow abilities when growing. So can you, because you're the one that chose it. And multicolored. And see, you even have this little thing here that tells you can activate yellow and you can activate multicolored. Same thing, obviously, with the blue. You can activate blue and you can activate multicolored as well. Pretty cool, right? So those are all the different actions that are in the game. Now, there are other things that you can play besides flora and terrain cards. You can also play an event card. So, let's see here. I have 1 event here, Low Tide. So, and this can be activated anytime I want to. I can even activate this on an opponent's turn. Even though it's their turn, I can choose to activate this on their turn if I want to. And so what does this Low Tide event do? Well, first of all, it means I have to discard 4 cards from my compost. So I'm losing 4 victory points, but I'm getting 3 soil. So I'm getting 3 money for that. So that's what that event's going to do. It's also worth 0 points at the end of the game. Some events are worth points. Some are worth minus points. So be wary of that. And every event card you play is going to go here. So it's going to stay on your player board here. It doesn't fill up your island. So only terrain and Flora cards are going to go onto your 4x4 grid in your Tableau island area, okay? So yeah, that's where the event cards are going to go. So that's how events work. I think I've explained this game to the best of my ability. Obviously, there's going to be other icons that you could potentially come across, you know, that do a variety of different abilities on cards. Let's see. Like, for instance, this one here. This one, you have to do the first two options to get the other two options if you decide to activate this ability. And that is, you basically lose a soil. You also lose a card from your compost. And by doing that, you get to grow one of your plants. So this could be one of the plants you could grow if it was in your Tableau. And you also get to put down 2 sprouts or 2 buds onto your plant. So, or onto your flora. So that's, you know, just one of the many abilities that you could potentially, you know, play. And it's still optional. Now, some plants also have, will also have black powers as well. Black powers are always on events, but there are some flora that have black powers that immediately activate when you play them. I think I mulched one, actually. Let's see if it's here in the mulch. Let's see. Here it is. So this red gram is a flora. You'll notice it has a black power on it. So when you play it into your Tableau, you immediately get 4 soil, 4 money. Okay? So that's how that's going to work. This one here, if it's a yellow power. So every time you grow, or your opponent grows, and you get to activate this to get 2 money or 2 soil. Pretty cool. So lots of different abilities. So there's definitely a lot of stuff going on here for sure. Man, this is just a really amazing game. So I think I explained everything to the best of my ability that is here. Oh, I forgot to mention. So if you're the first person to fill in your Tableau, a 4x4 grid, if you're the first person to play their 16th card, you will also get 7 additional victory points that way. So if you're the first person to do it, you get 7 additional points for doing it. But then you have this handy, obviously, score sheet that will help you keep track of what you can get for each stuff, victory point wise. So it's quite handy indeed. So anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. I hope this was a good explanation of how to play Earth. And I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.